Syria. And the third one, members of the Arab League, they want Syria and the Assad regime to address the use of Syria by Iran as a runway to send militias to infiltrate countries in the region.
Some European countries are tiptoeing back to President Assad too.
The third process is a European process, which is led by a group of 8 European countries that has officially called for the EU to change its foreign policy approach to Syria. The main topic related to normalization for the E8 countries is mainly refugees. A lot of countries in Europe are worried about continued waves of Syrian refugees coming to Europe, but also wants basically to set up a place where they can hopefully send some of the populations of Syrian refugees who are currently in Europe back to.
Syrians living in the north are nervously watching this diplomatic thaw.
In northeast Syria, there is definitely a fear that a deal between Turkey and Assad would mean, on one hand, allowing Turkey to go in a military operation and control Kurdish communities, leading, of course, eventually to pushing U.S. forces out of that region. In northwest Syria, I think the fear is mainly that normalization would allow Assad's control over parts of that region. That would mean they will have to surrender to the Assad regime and the Syrian government, which will result in another cycle of violence, of disappearance and torture against Syrian communities there.
For the regime, returning refugees may simply add to their financial pressures. Nearly all of Syria's oil and gas reserves lie in the northeast, and trade with neighbouring Turkey goes through the northwest.
The Assad regime doesn't have the oil resources that it used to have access to, but also Iran and Russia have limited the amount of support that they're giving the Assad regime because they feel, since the situation is militarily stable, that they don't need to spend a lot on the economy itself. And that's actually reflecting in very bad economic conditions for people living in regime-controlled areas. We're talking about electricity hours on average between 1 and 2 hours a day. We're talking about lack of jobs. Meanwhile, relatively, there are more economic opportunities increasing in northwest and northeast Syria.
Qutaiba says normalization has strengthened the hand of President Assad in any negotiations over the future of Syria.
They've actually empowered Assad or boldened Assad's position to not really give any concession. And in a sense, Assad is seeing that strategic patience is key here, that if he waits long enough, that all countries will come back to him, to Damascus, give all the concessions they want, and then it is up to Damascus to decide what they would want to give back.
But our next expert witness warns of the danger of leaving the north of the country out of the discussions.
Fragmented reality.
As things sort of just slowly start to normalize, they start to normalize toward the party in power, and then we start to forget about those other territories and also the reasons for their grievances.
Emma Beals is with the Middle East Institute in Washington and is a senior advisor at the European Institute of Peace.
People have short memories. People start to sort of forget the atrocities and the violence and the reasons that people went to the north. And we see that in the conversation about refugee return and all of these kinds of things. So those really legitimate fears and traumas and injustices that the people in the north continue to live with every day, and so do people in the regime areas, are increasingly forgotten in the policy conversation. And so they may be pressured, or refugees may be pressured into policy solutions that don't actually take any of what has happened into account.
Emma explains it's also hard for donors to fund long-term projects in northern Syria due to the political uncertainties, coupled with concerns over the various groups controlling the territory.
The humanitarian needs are enormous across northern Syria because there hasn't been the ability to do things like reconstruction of infrastructure. And I don't mean, the big fancy infrastructure. I mean water treatment plants or electricity grids or basic hospitals and so forth. What we've also seen is a lot of people living in half-built buildings, people living in tents, being expected to live in this long-term uncertainty. They're not able to do so in a way that meets their basic needs, which adds to the dangers of this situation.
There's no serious peace process underway in Syria. As we've heard, regional diplomatic efforts are focused more on reintegrating Assad. Emma says any formal discussions taking place don't factor in the reality on the ground.
The UN peace process doesn't really address the fact that there's 4 territories of control. You have the Arab League, who are in negotiations primarily with Assad, and they're kind of ignoring the northwest, the northeast as well. And then Turkey, having their conversations with Assad. And so what you don't have is really any path forward or any work stream or any active discussion that takes into account the fact that there are these 4 territories of control, more or less. And so you really just have this holding pattern where people are being forced to live in an unstable situation with huge humanitarian needs that continue to grow.
Emma warns that the shaky balance of power in northern Syria will potentially be threatened by international players taking decisions that the Syrian people have no say over.
Whether it's the Americans making choices about what happens with their troops, whether it's further normalization between Turkey and Assad, which would have consequences, whether it's, either a pulling back or a pushing forward, who obviously are involved across a whole range of regional countries, or just that one of these infractions that's going on, whether it's the northeast versus the northwest, Turkey sort of versus the northeast, ISIS has been on the rise as well. You're talking about millions of people here, millions of people with nowhere to go, with significant trauma from the conflict. And so I think that that's the real danger we face in Syria, is that if we ignore it, at some point the bill will come due. At some point, the situation is going to change, the table is going to get flipped over, and it won't be in a good way.
So let's return to our question. What's the future for Syria's divided north? There's no straightforward resolution in sight. Islamic State is resurgent in the region, and there's fears that an emboldened Assad might seek greater control over this oil-rich lost territory, leading to more violence. Much depends on the continued presence of US forces and what concessions Turkey can elicit when it comes to its domestic security concerns over the Syrian Kurds, from either a Trump administration or from normalizing ties with President Assad. Let's hear from Emma one last time.
Any one of those things could reach a point where it goes from just a bubbling increase in violence to a flashpoint that then sets off a series of reactions in this environment that continues to be very unstable.
The inquiry was presented by me, Emily Wither, produced by Diane Richardson and Matt Tolson. The editor is Tara McDermott, and it was mixed by Cameron Ward.
Shortly, Business Daily is finding out about luxury advent calendars. Then Witness History takes a look at the deepest made hole in the world.
I think the Earth is trying to tell us something here. Every time they get to about 11 kilometers depth, things get impossibly difficult.
In an hour, the documentary discusses the cultural importance of the music genre Amapiano.
A lot of the music that has been coming out of South Africa is black expression, is black joy.
And at bbcworldservice.com, Tech Life finds out about tiger tracking tech misuse.
These cameras are infringing on those spaces, and it's kind of inducing a sort of a self-regulatory and self-censoring mechanism within women, where they stop talking in front of cameras, or they stop singing songs, which is very traditional and very cultural.
This is the BBC World Service.
You're listening to the BBC Service. Today we're unwrapping the Advent calendar craze. Once simple treats for children, they've transformed into a booming market featuring everything from luxury beauty products to gourmet foods. But with rising costs and growing concerns about packaging waste, are they really worth it? That's in Business Daily with me, Deborah Whitesmith, after this latest world news.
With the BBC News, I'm Roisin Hasty. Hundreds of thousands of people are without electricity after a massive Russian attack on Ukraine's power grid. The strikes targeted at least 12 sites across the country, including several in the west. The ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon appears to be holding as it enters its second day. Both sides have said they're ready to respond to any violations. Donald Trump has spoken to the Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum for the first time since he said he would impose tariffs on Mexico unless it stemmed the influx of migrants and drugs into the US. Both said it was a positive conversation but gave different accounts of the outcome. Opposition lawmakers in India have disrupted Parliament for a third day, seeking a discussion on allegations against the business tycoon Gautam Adani and his Adani Group. US authorities have accused Mr. Adani and several associates of paying bribes to secure power supply contracts. The Adani Group has described the US charges as baseless. China has confirmed reports that it carried out a prisoner swap with the US, exchanging 3 Americans detained in China for 3 Chinese nationals. The Foreign Ministry did not confirm the identities of the Chinese nationals. British researchers say they found the first new treatment for asthma attacks in 50 years. The study suggests the drug benralizumab is both more effective and comes with fewer side effects. Greenland's new international airport opens today, heralding a significant economy. Travellers will now be able to arrive directly into the capital city, Nuuk. The old airport is more than 300 kilometres away. A team of European scientists has constructed a model of how dinosaurs rose to dominate Earth by studying fossilised excrement, vomit and food. Their investigations show how dinosaurs used evolutionary advantages to adapt to environmental changes that set back other species.
Hello and welcome to Business Daily with me, Deborah Whitesmith. With just weeks to go until Christmas, we're diving into the booming business of advent calendars.
It's crazy how many advent calendars are available. Not only just beauty, but weird and wacky ones. You can get like a wine one, you can get a dog treat one.
Advent calendars provide a unique way to count down to Christmas, revealing daily surprises throughout December.
Door number 1. We have the cute little chocolate bear. Door number 2.
It's a multi-million-dollar industry that started in Europe.
So many of Christmas customs come from Germany. Calendars were just simple and homemade.
Once costing just a few dollars for simple chocolate-filled ones, they've since become far more elaborate and significantly pricier.
This milk advent calendar costs almost $500.
This is an $800 advent calendar from Dior.
This to be the most expensive advent calendar I've ever opened.
When it comes to business, advent calendars can be a smart marketing tool.
For a brand like us, where we have anything from essential oils to high-performance skincare, it's a way that we can really demonstrate all of the things that we do.
Customers are enticed with deals.
The actual total value of the products inside can be even 10 times the actual headline value of the box.
However, not all shoppers are thrilled.
People are like, hey guys, this is not acceptable. The brands are having to come out and release a statement.
Environmental groups are still concerned about the level of waste.
These things are designed to be consumed quickly and thrown away. The good news is some brands are starting to make more of an effort.
That's all coming up here on the BBC World Service. I'm here at Liberty, one of London's most iconic department stores, for the reveal of their Christmas windows. This year they've been crafted by the creative team behind Universal Pictures' musical blockbuster Wicked. Holiday displays like this